This is TWiT.
Hey there, I'm Micah Sargent from TWiT, and you may be asking a question. What in the world do you do if you want to thank that hard-working team of yours? Well, why not gift them a Club TWiT corporate subscription? Oh, and here's a secret. You'll be benefiting yourself too, because you will be able to keep your team informed and entertained with podcasts covering the latest in tech, so they'll always stay up to date. With a Club TWiT subscription, they're going to get access to all of our podcasts ad-free. They'll get access to the members-only Discord server where they can chat with fellow Club TWiT members and all of us here at TWiT, and exclusive shows like Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, and the Untitled Linux Show. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit and look for corporate plans for complete details.
Biggest Apple news of the week. Apple admitting that COVID shutdowns in China are impacting manufacture of iPhone 14 Pro and Max. I guess they don't really care too much about the iPhone 14 because nobody's buying that. This is the quote from their press release. COVID-19 restrictions have temporarily impacted the primary iPhone 14 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max assembly facility located in Zhengzhou, China. The facility is operating at significantly reduced capacity, and this is, of course, due to COVID-19. We expect lower iPhone Pro, 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max shipments than we previously anticipated. You will receive longer wait times to get your new products. So if you hadn't ordered and received, I guess if you'd ordered and got a date, you're probably cool. But if you're ordering now, you may not get it. I don't know. I haven't looked. Jason, have people started complaining about this?
I mean, they're definitely, those dates are pushing back. So we're definitely seeing some of that happening. And this happened actually in the spring but it was in Shanghai, and it was the Mac assembly facility. And it actually drove Mac sales down for a quarter, and then they rebounded last quarter. But there was that period in there where if you tried to buy a Mac, it would say you need to wait a month or two, which was really unprecedented, right? Like the Tim Cook machine, every one that comes off the assembly line is bought at that moment, right? Like that's the dream for Tim Cook. And, the Mac stuff was hard, but the Mac is only a portion of Apple's revenue. The iPhone is more than half of Apple's revenue most of the time. And this is the most popular product, right? The iPhone 12 Pro, 14 Pro. So this is brutal. I mean, like this came out on a Sunday. It is sort of mandated that this is a material effect on their business. But I think what it is strongly suggesting is that when they report their results in 3 months, iPhone sales are going to be hit by this because this is their quarter. This is their highest quarter for everything, including the iPhone, and their most popular iPhones are not going to be available or in limited quantities. And maybe they can spin things up, but you get the sense from what's happened before. When they sort of taper off, everything kind of stops, and then it doesn't just flip back to 100%. There's a whole process they have to go through to get back up to speed.
I just tried to order an iPhone 14 Pro December 9th delivery, which isn't the worst. I mean, that's a month. That's not not like next year.
It's just not Tim Cook's ideal, right?
Yeah. You want to make as many as you can sell.
And I think that there are so many issues right now with Chinese production that I think that you're seeing Apple and a lot of other folks starting to try to diversify. Now, some of it's required. So Brazil and India require them to build some of it in their country to sell into that market. But I think that you're also looking at Vietnam is benefiting from kind of a move out of China. And I think that you'll see a lot of companies continue to do that. I think that there's a lot of concern, as we've talked about before, around doing it all between the variety of issues with COVID to infrastructural issues that China is starting to experience to Taiwan. There's just a lot of risk that is getting applied to everybody's production that's happening in the country.
Was an interesting piece in Financial Times yesterday. Apple's bargain with Beijing, access to China's factories and consumers. And the point of it was that Tim Cook has played a very canny game, meeting with President Xi many times pre-pandemic to basically get free rein in China, which has benefited them hugely in terms of sales. And of course, it means that it's important. Chinese manufacturing is important. And I think it may also mean that do you think it might mean that Apple might be slow to pull out of pull manufacturing out of China? Like that's an important tit for tat.
I think for everyone, it's 5 to 10 years, and I don't think they're pulling out. Anyway. I think that they're diversifying. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, we're not going to do any more work in China. I think that they just need to move it from 100% down to 30%. I think would make a big difference in the ability to flex if they needed to.
Yeah. It was an interesting article because it did make the point that Apple has succeeded not only getting into a good relationship with China, but also tying a lot of China's manufacturing prestige with Apple. So they're very, very much in a slightly symbiotic relationship where they benefit each other, which is why Tim Cook has this back channel pipeline to the person who can get things done. So if you need manufacturing, if you need a problem solved, if you need a factory opened, if you need diversions of resources to make sure that your product line remains free and flexible, you're going to get it. It also made the good point that sanctions against China from the U.S. has hurt Chinese phone makers and actually enhanced Apple and making Apple, I think they're saying the number one tech company, if not the number one phone manufacturer in China right now, with some Jason Snell like graphs to back up their claim.
This is actually the interesting graph. Huawei, remember when Huawei was banned in the U.S., Chinese consumers patriotically jumped on Huawei, and you could see that they had as much as like 27% of the market in the first half of 2020. It has plummeted, and Apple has grown commensurately. Huawei's share of the Chinese market, says the Financial Times, plummeted from a high of 29% in mid-2020 to just 7% 2022, while Apple's share jumped from 9 to 17%.
Well, and I think also the Huawei phones, I've had some Huawei phones, and they're just not very good. I think that's the problem is you're competing, for if you're competing in the luxury market, the Huawei phones just aren't really competitive with even other Chinese phones.
It's Apple. The iPhone is the prestige brand that, as you have more people going, as the middle class is getting a little bit more the same way that the middle class in the United States was in the 50s and 60s, saying, "Hey, I want to make sure that I've got the great car, I've got the great house, I've got the great whatever, I've got the new washing machine." The thing that the middle class wants are prestige Apple phones and not domestic made, no domestic made label common phones that they can get with in their current stuff.
Yeah, the symbiosis here is, I think, really interesting. The idea that it's very easy to look at China and say, well, China is this giant country, and so like Apple needs China and China doesn't need Apple. And that's not true, right? Like it goes both ways. And that's the reason Apple has escaped in times when, especially during the Trump administration, right, there was all of the saber rattling and like we're gonna nobody buy anything from these various Chinese companies. And it would have been so easy for them to be like, well, fine, Apple is now out of China. And that didn't happen for a reason, because they've cultivated this relationship. But it does, and from China's perspective, it gives them manufacturing prestige. It does. It makes the people in China really happy. They love having the ability to buy an Apple product. And if that went away, they would be a little less happy. And as much power as the Chinese Communist Party has, you don't want to make the people real angry with you, right? Like you want to have some level where they feel like they're comfortable, and so they're not going to rock the boat. So there's a lot going on in that. It's funny now, though, to look at it and think the problem is that if it gets out of balance at all, Apple has all their eggs in that basket. That's right. Like it's not all. They are doing some iPhone manufacturing in India and some in Brazil, and I've heard about a bunch of stuff that they're trying to spin up in Vietnam, and like they are trying. It seems like the Shanghai shutdown actually back in the spring was one of those moments where they realized they actually need to start moving on, not relying only on China. But that relationship, benefits China and benefits Apple. It really is symbiotic in a very strange way.
It still underscores the problems that the risks that Apple is taking. Where what happens if China decides to invade Taiwan? What if they decide to even increase their crackdowns on Hong Kong? What if there are human rights violations that become on the world scale, kind of like Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Is that going to how caustic will that relationship become for Apple to be so closely tied with China? So it's a dancing act for sure.
They're cut between a rock and a hard place, though, if they want this Chinese market. And it's been, I know from those colorful graphs at sixcolors.com. The China market has been a big propellant in Apple's success over the last couple of years, and the growth there is very important to Apple. This is also from the Financial Times. Apple's worked hard to satisfy the tastes of Chinese customers. When local competitors rolled out smartphones with bigger screens like the Huawei Honor, more advanced cameras with low-light photography, Xiaomi's stuff is pretty amazing, and a dual SIM card slot, it was Apple's Chinese employees who pushed the Cupertino-based company to follow suit, said one person close to the China operations. I might question that. I think there's been pressure, global pressure towards in those directions. But Tim Cook himself has credited feedback from Chinese customers for a, quote, ton of features. This is Cook speaking now, including night mode and a QR code reader. Again, I'm quoting from FT. Even 5G in a lot of ways, said Cook, was energized in China because China's so far ahead in the coverage model for 5G. This is Tim Cook finishing up. He was telling this, it was on a social media interview with a 22-year-old Chinese student. So we listen very carefully to our customers there.
Yeah, and it's a big customer base,
Right.
So they listen a lot to the United States. They listen a lot to China because those are two of their biggest customers.
By the way, we should also point out that Brazil facility is built not just to diversify, but because Brazil has a huge tariff on stuff not made in Brazil.
And India is the same way.
Same thing with India.
So that's what I was saying. Yeah.
But it also gives Apple a little plausible deniability when China goes, why are you making iPhones somewhere other than here? They're like, well,
we have to.
Tariffs, tariffs are...
We don't want to, President Xi. Understand. And right now, iPhone production is 95% in China.
Yeah.
Right. And
we comply with all local laws when we're forced to, China. I'm sorry.
when we're forced to.
And I think that the thing is that the COVID breakdowns and everything else also give them a little cover to just start stepping away, going, well, this was really a big deal for us. We lost billions of dollars. We need to make sure that we can keep on doing it. So I think that they've got a little coverage. I think that the big thing that I think most people are worried about is Taiwan. How do you because it just was untenable to stay in Russia after they went into Ukraine. Some companies held out for a little while, but it's just the damage to the brand is so heavy, and for Apple it would be devastating. If China went into Taiwan, Apple would have to stop. Like they would have to, they wouldn't be able to maintain their brand if China's going into Taiwan, and so they have to figure out a way that they're going to be able to. And services help them too. Like services are something they don't need to do in China.
I'll tell you what.
So that's the issue.
If you wanted to appoint a diplomat to China, Tim Cook would be a pretty good choice, right?
Well, he did that also,
because he feels like he's a very calm, rational actor. I think he acts in the best interests of his company and to some degree the U.S. I think he considers that. You have to compare Apple's success in China with Meta and Alphabet and Netflix, all of which are banned in China.
He's also been able.
Let's save this relationship.
He looks at where his lines really can be. Like he'll give you the cloud data, but he won't give you the phone data. He'll look at also how to delay things in EU. In the EU, they were able to delay the USB-C ruling until it didn't matter anymore. And I think that he did a pretty good job at managing his relationship with Trump. He's obviously not a big. Probably not. I would doubt that Tim Cook voted for Trump, but he was able to maintain a relationship with him that kept Apple out of the mix of all the fighting back and forth that Trump did with China.
Yeah.
That is true. It is a deal with it. You do have to be concerned about it making deals with the devil. The legitimacy that he gave Trump by sitting right next to him and participating in this sort of stuff when you might want to have put some distance and not sort of help people. You allowing Trump to use an Apple manufacturing facility in Texas for a really, really, really bad photo op about how good the benefits that Trump is building to bring jobs bring manufacturing out of Asia and back into the United States. Those are almost philosophical questions to have. But it's the other difference is that Apple is not in a business where it really threatens China. Apple is in a business of manufacturing hardware, where this is something that benefits China by, again, giving them lots of manufacturing jobs, giving them very, very well-paying, very high manufacturing jobs where workers are treated extremely well compared to pretty much every other manufacturer. Whereas it's impossible for Google to participate It's impossible for Twitter to participate. It's impossible for Facebook to participate because their product is all about free access to information and free access to people forming groups with each other, which is anathema to what the government wants its people to be able to do. So, yeah, Apple definitely has several legs up on every other major United States tech company in that regard.
Yeah.